She wore my face. She sat at my wedding. I'm here, and everyone will see. But the truth can't stay hidden.
Amarachi's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail: the polished mahogany floor, the soft sunlight streaming through sheer curtains. Her wrists throbbed from the silk restraints, a reminder not only of physical captivity, but of the betrayal that had been decades in the making, a combination of every whispered insult, every taunt, every subtle manipulation. She knew her sister's mind intimately. She had grown up studying it in tandem with her own reflection, noting every twitch of a brow, every smile's hidden edge. Amarisa's confidence was loud and effortless, but it relied on external admiration and the predictable reactions of those around her. Amarachi, in contrast, had learned patience and observation, virtues honed by years of being underestimated. She flexed her fingers and toes, testing the tension of the silk ties, remembering the small detail Amarisa had overlooked: a knot poorly threaded through the folds of the fabric, a subtle loop that allowed leverage if one approached carefully. It was the first spark of hope. Amarachi's breathing slowed as she centered herself, mentally rehearsing every movement. Her mind mapped escape routes: the slight give of the window latch, the placement of the floor stool, the sound patterns outside the suite, a distant servant moving between halls, a subtle thrum of wedding drums signaling moments of distraction. She reminded herself that panic would only tighten the knot around her wrists. Clarity was strength. As she worked the silk slowly, deliberately, the knot loosened. Her first hand slipped free, trembling but victorious. Amarachi pressed her wrist to her forehead, willing her racing heart to slow, then rotated her body, freeing the second wrist. With both hands liberated, she rose quietly, listening. Not for footsteps, but for opportunity. Her gaze fell on the narrow window, the only feasible escape route. It was partially obscured by delicate curtains, the sun catching the embroidery in fleeting glimmers, as if mocking her struggle with flashes of elegance. Amarachi's lips pressed together in a line of determination. The betrayal was immense, but her resolve was greater. Every ounce of her upbringing, quiet, observant, loyal, converged into one singular purpose. She would not allow herself to be erased, not by her sister, not by circumstance, not by the allure of a prince's world that Amarisa sought to hijack. With a measured breath, she approached the window, sliding the stool beneath it, each movement silent and precise. Her pulse raced, not from fear, but from the clarity of purpose. She would claim her life back with her own hands, and when she did, Amarisa would see that duplicity had limits, even for a twin. Amarachi pressed her back lightly against the smooth wall, her palms brushing the polished window frame as she assessed her only viable escape route. The stool beneath the narrow window felt solid under her weight, a bridge between captivity and freedom. The soft ivory curtains quivered with the morning breeze, casting patterned shadows across the mahogany floor, but she ignored the fleeting elegance. Her focus was absolute. Every nerve in her body hummed with quiet anticipation. The memory of Amarisa's calm, predatory smile burned hotter than the mild sting still lingering on her wrists. Years of being underestimated had honed patience into a precise instrument, one she wielded now with careful deliberation. She shifted the stool slightly, angling it for maximum stability, and slid one foot onto it, testing the balance. The second foot followed, steadying her as she leaned toward the sash. Her fingers, nimble and exact, worked the latch, gently pressing and rotating until a subtle click betrayed the lock's surrender. Her chest rose and fell in measured breaths. Adrenaline surged, but fear remained subservient to purpose. She peeked cautiously outside. The manicured gardens lay beneath, sunlight glinting off the hedges and stone pathways. A faint shuffle caught her ear, the distant movement of a security guard patrolling near the perimeter. Amarachi froze for the briefest of moments, counting the seconds, calibrating risk versus opportunity. Then, with deliberate speed, she shifted her weight, pushing the window open just enough to slip through. A soft hiss of metal and wood accompanied the motion, but no alarm sounded. She leaned forward, one hand gripping the sill, the other braced against the stool, and lowered herself onto the first branch of freedom, the edge of the garden below. The guard, startled by a shadow against the window, hesitated. Amarachi's voice cut through the morning air, firm, commanding, desperate. "Help! My sister! She's taking my place! You must stop her!" Confusion flickered across the man's face, but instinct and urgency compelled him into motion. Amarachi guided herself carefully down the slope of the garden, noting every hedge, every stone, every subtle elevation, transforming the grounds into a mental map she could trust. The suite, with all its elegance and deceptive calm, receded behind her, a reminder of betrayal and resilience intertwined. Her wrists and arms ached slightly from the silk restraints, but it was nothing compared to the fire coiling in her veins. She was moving toward the cathedral, toward the life she had been denied for a fleeting moment, toward the prince, toward the truth. Each step was precise, deliberate, and with every stride, her resolve crystallized. Amarachi would arrive as herself, untamed by fear, unbroken, and ready to reclaim what was hers. Amarachi and the startled guard moved swiftly through the meticulously landscaped gardens surrounding the luxury suite, the first rays of dawn glinting against the manicured hedges and reflecting off polished stone pathways. Every step she took reminded her that she had mere minutes. Every second counted. And yet, her mind worked with the patience and precision she had always relied on. She did not panic. She calculated. She memorized the turns, the hidden service paths, and the side gate that would lead her toward the main road without being seen. The guard stumbled slightly on the uneven cobblestones, and Amarachi caught his arm instinctively, steadying him without a word, aware that any hesitation could cost her precious moments. As they moved, she listened intently for the faint sounds of Amarisa's plan unfurling, a vehicle engine warming, a staff member returning to check on the guest, perhaps even a glimpse of Amarisa herself inspecting her handiwork. Each sound became a piece of a puzzle, each distraction a potential obstacle or opportunity. The wind carried the scent of tropical flowers, sweet and heady, mingling with the faint traces of incense drifting from preparations at the distant cathedral. Amarachi's pulse remained steady, her focus absolute. Her silk marks on her wrists throbbed, a subtle reminder of both the physical and psychological restraint her sister had imposed, but she refused to let it dictate her movement. As they approached the edge of the property, the guard whispered, "There's a road that leads straight to the highway. You'll be safe if you move fast." Amarachi nodded sharply, mentally charting the distance, the traffic, the chance of discovery. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice low but commanding, as she adjusted her steps to avoid drawing attention. Every instinct was tuned, the thrum of her heartbeat, the rhythm of her breaths, the knowledge that each footfall brought her closer to the wedding, closer to the moment where she would have to reclaim her life and her love. She didn't look back. She could not afford to. Amarisa, with her polished facade, was still orchestrating chaos, yet her mind raced ahead, imagining the cathedral, the white lilies, the anticipation in Chidubem's eyes, and the truth that no amount of imitation could steal. With one final glance at the sprawling luxury suite that had been her cage, she stepped onto the service path leading toward freedom, determination carving a path through fear, and every fiber of her being poised for the reckoning that awaited at the end of her escape. Amarachi stepped cautiously onto the quiet road beyond the luxury suite, her wrists still aching from the silk restraints, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The morning sunlight spilled across the outskirts of Enugu, glinting off polished stone walls and manicured gardens that surrounded the suite, a reminder of the elegance her sister had used to cage her. Now she was truly alone, and every decision, every movement depended entirely on her. She adjusted the loose, comfortable attire she had worn to the spa, smoothing the folds of her top and shifting her sandals to walk more silently. Her mind raced, calculating the risks of being seen by passers-by, workers, neighbors, or anyone out early. In casual clothing, she might blend in, but the urgency in her eyes, the intensity of her pace, could betray her if someone glanced too long. The cathedral lay miles away, in the heart of the main town, its ivory spires catching the sun like a distant promise, both hope and pressure bundled into a single goal. Amarachi scanned the roadside, and her eyes landed on a motorcycle taxi parked under a tree, the driver leisurely sipping tea. She approached quickly, her voice calm but urgent. "Please, can you take me into the town, the cathedral, quickly?" she said, keeping her tone controlled. The man, startled by her expression but sensing seriousness, nodded and lifted her onto the back, and she clutched her small bag, careful to balance herself as the engine rumbled beneath. The ride was tense, every bump, every turn along the uneven road a reminder that she was exposed, that at any moment someone could recognize her or misunderstand, or worse, intercept her. Yet with each passing meter, Amarachi's resolve strengthened. Thoughts of the wedding, of Chidubem waiting unknowingly, of her sister posing as her, sharpened her focus. Every heartbeat synced with the engine's rhythm, every glance at the distant town spires a measure of her progress. She leaned slightly forward, urging the driver on, her mind mapping the quickest routes, every shortcut and alley she had learned in childhood, now a tool in her flight. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows, and with each pulse of the engine, Amarachi felt herself moving not just towards the cathedral, but towards reclaiming the life, the love, and the truth that Amarisa had tried to steal from her. The motorcycle weaved through the outskirts, the wind tugging at Amarachi's hair and the loose edges of her blouse, every jolt and turn reminding her that time was her most dangerous adversary. She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the ivory spires of the cathedral rose like a promise, while simultaneously scanning every side street, alley, and pedestrian. Any observer could delay or even jeopardize her flight. The taxi driver moved cautiously, occasionally glancing at her in the rearview mirror, but Amarachi hardly spoke. Her mind was alive with calculations. Traffic was sparse but unpredictable, a stray goat here, a street vendor opening a stall there, all minor obstacles that required her constant attention. She rehearsed her plans silently: make it to the main road, find a faster vehicle if possible, avoid drawing attention, and above all, ensure she arrived at the cathedral before her sister fully assumed her role. Each pulse of the engine mirrored her racing heart, a mechanical drumbeat urging her forward. Thoughts of Amarisa's poised smile haunted her, the way her sister twisted confidence and beauty into a weapon, confident that no one could see through her carefully constructed mimicry. Amarachi clenched her fists, imagining the elaborate gown, the perfect makeup, the practiced gestures, a masquerade of her identity designed to steal her life. But the distance also reminded her of her own advantages: knowledge, patience, and the clarity of purpose that Amarisa lacked. Every decision she made on this stretch of road was deliberate. Every glance at oncoming vehicles, every adjustment of posture, every attempt to shield her face from early morning observers. The spires of the cathedral seemed closer now, yet with each passing bend, she knew that any delay could be catastrophic. A sudden thought struck her. She needed more speed, more control. She scanned the roadside for a taxi, a delivery van, any vehicle heading straight into the town center. There, a small white sedan idling near a junction. Amarachi leaned forward slightly and tapped the rider's shoulder, her voice firm but urgent. "Please, stop there, by that junction." The rider followed her gaze. Just ahead, near the bend in the road, a small white sedan idled beside the curb, its engine humming quietly as if waiting for a fare. The motorcycle rolled to a halt. Amarachi quickly climbed down, the hem of her ivory robe brushing the dusty roadside as she reached into her bag and handed the rider the fare with a grateful nod. There was no time for lengthy words, only urgency. Then she turned. The small white sedan was still idling near the junction, its engine vibrating softly in the quiet morning air. Amarachi walked quickly towards it, her sandals brushing against the dusty roadside as she raised a hand to catch the driver's attention. The driver inside looked up momentarily, startled by the sight of a woman in an ivory robe hurrying towards him with such urgency. Amarachi stopped beside the passenger window, her breath steady but her eyes intense. "Please," she said, her voice controlled but firm, "I need to get to the cathedral in the town center. Quickly." The driver studied her for only a second, long enough to sense the seriousness in her expression. Without another question, he leaned across the seat and pushed the passenger door open. "Get in." Amarachi didn't hesitate. Jumping in, she gave precise instructions, heart hammering, every mile stretching into both anxiety and hope. She wasn't just racing against time, she was racing against betrayal, against her sister's ambition, and towards a moment that could not wait, towards reclaiming the life, the love, and the truth that Amarisa had tried to steal from her. The sedan eased into the heart of the town, Amarachi gripping the edge of the seat, her mind a whirlwind of strategy and anticipation. The streets were alive now, early vendors shouting greetings to one another, children running between legs of hurried townspeople, polished cars and motorcycles weaving through the traffic, all a chaotic symphony that threatened to slow her progress. Yet every observation, every glance became a tool. She measured the distance to the cathedral, noting side streets that might allow her to bypass crowded areas, alleys where she could cut through undetected, and raised balconies where she could momentarily conceal herself if anyone recognized her. Her pulse quickened at the first distant strains of ceremonial music, the drums and choir harmonies drifting faintly over rooftops, a reminder that her sister was already executing the final act of deception. Amarachi's stomach tightened at the thought. Amarisa poised at the altar, radiant, flawless, and deliberately poised in the gown that had been stolen from her. The sedan slowed at a junction near the cathedral's plaza, the towering ivory spires now visible beyond the bustling square. As the car rolled to a stop along the curb, Amarachi reached quickly into her handbag, pulling out a few folded notes and pressing them into the driver's hand. "Thank you," she said, breathlessly, her voice sincere despite the urgency pressing on every second. The driver nodded, still slightly bewildered by the intensity of the morning's unexpected passenger. Amarachi pushed the door open and slid from the seat with careful urgency, mindful of the polished dress shoes and skirts of early pedestrians crossing the plaza. Her hair clung damply to the back of her neck, sweat from exertion making the soft ivory fabric of her robe cling slightly to her skin, yet she moved with quiet intensity, every step purposeful. The cathedral's massive doors rose ahead, their gilded carvings catching the morning sun, and the gathered crowd of guests and onlookers already presented a subtle challenge. Any misstep, any hesitation could draw attention, yet she had to navigate through them without alerting her sister prematurely. Voices whispered, some in awe, some in casual curiosity, and Amarachi noticed how easily the crowd could be misled by appearances. Her thoughts flashed to the gown in Amarisa's possession, the perfect mimicry she had perfected, and she clenched her jaw, realizing that the truth alone would be her weapon, her only defense against a twin who could charm 100 eyes and hide 100 lies. Every breath was measured, every step calculated. The cathedral spire seemed impossibly close now, yet the final stretch demanded more than speed. It demanded composure, observation, and the courage to confront the impossible, walking into a hall where her identity had been stolen, knowing the crowd, the prince, and her sister were all poised to believe in the illusion. And yet, as she took the next step toward the plaza, determination surged. She would reclaim herself, even if it meant navigating chaos, confusion, and the weight of betrayal all at once. Amarachi stepped onto the plaza in front of the cathedral, the sunlight reflecting off the gilded doors, the crowd of guests, family, and onlookers already bustling like living mosaic tiles beneath her feet. The moment she entered, the distant drumbeats and choir harmonies coalesced into a tangible pulse that matched her own racing heart. She slowed her steps, scanning the crowd carefully, noting the murmurs, the glances, and the subtle shifts in posture,
all signs of uncertainty and anticipation. Her eyes caught her first glimpse of Amarisa at the entrance, her twins' posture perfect, her smile perfectly measured, her gown flowing like a river of ivory silk. Gasps and whispers rippled through the assembled guests. Some stared in awe, others in polite recognition. Amarachi's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of the deception laid bare before her. The elegance, the poise, the rehearsed gestures. Her sister had transformed her identity into a living mask, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, Amarachi questioned how anyone could pierce such a carefully constructed illusion. But then she remembered the intimate truths only she and Chidubem shared, the private moments of laughter, the little promises whispered under the canopy of heritage and understanding, the memories that no twin, no matter how identical, could replicate. She drew a deep, steadying breath, allowing the rhythm of the cathedral's distant bells to anchor her focus. Every step forward was a challenge. She had to move through the crowd without panic, yet her presence alone risked exposure before the proper moment. She noted the subtle glances of staff and family, the slight hesitation of guests unsure whom to acknowledge, and the flicker of doubt that had already begun to cross Chidubem, a recognition that something was not quite right. Amarachi adjusted the strap of her small bag, keeping her gaze forward, yet memorizing every obstacle, every hiding spot, every possible route should her sister act too quickly. Her resolve crystallized. She would not confront blindly, nor would she allow anger to cloud her judgment. The moment demanded strategy, precision, and courage. She moved into the shifting currents of the crowd, feeling the invisible tension coil around her like a living thing, every breath preparing her for the inevitable collision of truth and deception. Amarachi's mind rehearsed the words she would need to speak, the intimate memories she would recall, and the private promises only she and Chidubem knew, the final proof that would expose Amarisa and reclaim not only her love but her life. Amarachi stepped into the cathedral, the polished marble floors reflecting the morning light, as if amplifying the tension she carried. Her gaze immediately found Amarisa at the altar, radiant, flawless, and deliberately poised in the bridal gown that had been stolen from her. The crowd murmured softly, a blend of awe and polite curiosity, their eyes flicking between the twins, uncertain what to believe. Amarisa's lips curved into her practiced smile, but there was a flicker of apprehension in her eyes, the first sign that she sensed the approaching storm. Amarachi's heart thundered, not with fear, but with the precision of strategy and the urgency of reclaiming her life. She took deliberate steps forward, her voice clear. Chidubem, the name carried through the hushed hall, slicing the tension into a tangible pause. Amarisa's smile faltered, then hardened. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her tone sharp, trying to mask panic with authority. "You are lying," she continued, her voice rising slightly. "This is my place. You don't belong here." Amarachi's eyes locked at her sister, calm but unyielding. "I belong where the truth is," she replied softly, "and you cannot claim what was never yours." Amarisa's hands trembled slightly as she stepped closer, trying to force confidence into her posture, her voice dripping with desperation. "You think you can fool him. The prince doesn't even know you. I am the bride. He will choose me." Across the room, Chidubem's expression tightened, subtle shadows of doubt and recognition flitting across his face. He noticed Amarachi's careful gaze, the confident way she held herself despite the journey, and the faintly familiar glint in her eyes. Amarachi pressed on, each word deliberate, intimate, and impossible for Amarisa to replicate. "Do you remember the promise beneath the Ikenga River, Chidubem? The night you laughed at my stumble across the cobblestones outside the palace library. Only we shared that moment. Only I know it." A flicker of recognition passed across the prince's features, a softening of his lips, a deepening of his eyes. Amarisa's composure broke further. She reached out, as if to grab Amarachi's arm, her face twisting with disbelief and rage. "You are lying. She's lying. You can't believe her." Amarachi shook her head gently, taking a careful step back, her voice unwavering. "I am Amarachi. She cannot know what only we know." The guests leaned forward, sensing the collision of truth and deception. The air itself seemed tight, the collective heartbeat of the cathedral rising. Amarisa's breathing quickened, her public mask cracking under the weight of evidence she could not counter. Chidubem's gaze hardened, recognition blooming fully, his hand instinctively reaching for Amarachi. The confrontation had reached its peak, deception and truth colliding under the sunlit spires, with the crowd, the family, and the prince all bearing witness to the unmasking of ambition and the reclamation of identity. The cathedral seemed to tremble under the sudden awareness of the crowd, a quiet chaos rippling through rows of well-dressed guests as the truth settled like dust in the air. Amarisa stood frozen, her hands slightly raised, as though to plead, argue, or perhaps grab at the narrative she had so meticulously constructed. But every gesture now looked desperate, almost pathetic under the watchful eyes of everyone present. Whispers surged into soft murmurs, murmurs into gasps, the murky line between polite decorum and disbelief dissolving as realization spread. "It's true, she knows things only Amarachi would know," some whispered, voices tinged with awe and curiosity. Amarisa's face flushed, her chest rising and falling with rapid, shallow breaths, and for the first time, she seemed smaller than her carefully maintained stature. "No, you can't believe her. She's lying. You are being deceived," she cried, her voice cracking under the strain of her unraveling performance. Amarachi remained calm. The storm of composure she had cultivated carried her forward as she met every accusation with quiet authority. "The truth cannot be hidden," she said, voice clear and strong, letting the intimate recollections of their shared moments with Chidubem, promises, laughter, whispers serve as unassailable proof. The prince's eyes, steady and intent, followed her every word. He saw the subtle inflections, the hesitation in Amarisa's tone, the way her eyes darted nervously at him, and with each word he felt certainty crystallize. The woman before him, speaking with memories only they shared, was his true bride. Amarisa's veil of control collapsed entirely, her gaze flicking across the guests, many of whom now stared openly, recognizing the deception. The society elite, influential friends, palace representatives, family elders could not help but note the subtle disaster unfolding before them. A once proud young woman, ambitious and beautiful, reduced to an exposed, publicly questioned figure. Amarachi's parents stepping forward embraced her with quiet pride and sorrow for their other daughter's fall from favor, while Chidubem reached out, taking Amarachi's hand firmly. The prince's voice carried now, both to Amarisa and the hall. "The choice has always been clear. Amarachi is my bride. She is the woman I promised, the one I know and trust." Amarisa's lips trembled, her plan utterly dismantled, the cathedral's polished order reflecting the sting of public exposure. The crowd, sensing the finality of truth, murmured in approval, eyes following Amarachi with admiration and respect, while whispers of Amarisa's audacity and failure began to weave themselves into the social fabric of the elite community. The humiliation was absolute, not violent, not punitive, but far more devastating. Her ambition, her lies, and her envy laid bare before everyone, leaving her to navigate a world where whispers replaced admiration, where her sister's triumph overshadowed her once brilliant influence. Amarachi stood poised, calm, victorious, a queen in the making, while Amarisa faced the irreversible consequences of envy and deception, fully exposed in the very society she had sought to impress. The cathedral doors closed behind the departing guests, but the echoes of whispers, speculation, and awed commentary lingered like a shadow over the hall. Amarisa stood frozen, her shoulders stiff, head slightly lowered, fully aware that her carefully constructed facade had crumbled in a single decisive moment. Every subtle gesture, every polite murmur she had cultivated over the years to command admiration had been exposed as hollow. She had not been jailed, nor physically punished, but the humiliation cut deeper than any prison sentence could have. In the weeks that followed, society's elite treated her differently. A polite distance replaced admiration, and subtle glances of judgment followed her in meetings, soirees, and public appearances. Men who once admired her calculated charm now studied her with a mixture of wariness and pity. Friends whispered behind their hands, unsure whether to show loyalty or self-preservation. Even in her own family, the warmth she had expected was replaced by quiet acknowledgement of failure. Meanwhile, Amarachi moved forward gracefully, poised and unshaken. She had claimed her rightful place beside Chidubem, the prince whose gaze carried recognition, love and trust, and yet she did so without malice. Every smile she offered, every wave to guests, carried the quiet power of a woman who had endured treachery, strategy, and the theft of identity, and had triumphed with intelligence, courage, and dignity. Amarisa, on the other hand, became a permanent lesson in envy and ambition untempered with conscience. Each day, each social event served as a reminder. The world had seen her deception, the truth had prevailed, and Amarachi's quiet strength had outshone her showy duplicity. In a modern Igbo royal dynasty, whispers were far more potent weapons than scandal sheets, and Amarisa now lived with them, constantly, subtly, and publicly. There were no dramatic exits, no final acts of vengeance, only the slow burn of recognition that she had failed not through force of circumstance, but through her own choices. Amarachi, the gentle, quiet twin who had always been overlooked, now carried the admiration of a people who valued integrity, courage, and character above all, while Amarisa endured the social calculus of humiliation, a constant, unshakable weight in the very society she had sought to dominate. And in that, the story found its balance, a modern tale of ambition, envy, love, and the quiet triumph of truth, leaving Amarisa alive, yet forever living with the psychological sting of her exposed deceit, and Amarachi victorious, crowned not just in title, but in respect and enduring admiration. Amarachi triumphed, Amarisa faced the cost of ambition, and the story of courage, envy, and truth comes to its thrilling close, for now. If you are captivated by their journey, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to catch more African folktales and stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.